Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. This is me, your host, and you're back for another episode of ShOUT Show, the SOS, with me, your host, Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope everybody's having a great day. I hope everybody's engaging with their families, their jobs, whatever you're doing. You know, make sure you're trying to bring your best self to whatever activity you decide to do today: job, family, spirituality. Yesterday, we talked about embracing our spiritual inner gangster. And I thank those people that came along. We'll inshallah, we will revisit that a little bit later in the year. I think there's a lot to that. Today's topic, I chose not to do it right after it happened, but today's topic, Black Man, is reflections on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's July 4th speech. And I thought it was really interesting to talk about it. Because I'm not sure if a lot of people are understanding, particularly what they saw. There may be disagreements with Nation Islam philosophy, Aqidah, all those type of things. But what can't be overlooked is the importance it played to the foundational aspects and foundation laid here in the United States for Islam in America. There's some things that I think were gems, if you will, from the minister's speech, but it also belied where we are right now in current times in regards to social justice and that impetus, if you will, the social justice, but also Black life, Black pride, Black family. And I listened to a speech from somebody I respect. And people go, oh, he's this, he's that. Listen, not everybody's going to agree. He tells you not everybody's going to agree because it's a part of intellect. It's a part of growing up. But when I watched the speech over twice, that's a lot of watching, by the way, what I gathered was a couple things. Whether we may not want to, whether we want to admit it or not, this may be one of the last presentations we will see from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I surmise that not by what he said, not just by what he said, but also the tenor and how he said it. It may not be clear to people, but the man used to give a lesson. He taught. But the man gave a lesson about how, in some regards, like a father or a loving uncle, a loving elder, he reminded us, particularly in the Black community, that we have not lived up. We've not completed the mission. We have not followed the steps and the breadcrumbs, if you will, for building Black sustainability, building a Black justice system, if you will, and also building Black confidence. And he was kind with it. But as I listened to him, I began to hear the voices of Malcolm. I began to hear the voices of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and even Master Fard Muhammad. Because what he was telling us, he was reminding us that he had reminded us of these things before. We're at a time, if you start breaking down where we are, this is one of the first times in a when we had this a social justice movement of just huge magnitude involving Black life, we did not see him involved. We did not see him invited to the funeral. We did not see him invited to speak. And I'm not sure what the circumstances are around why he wasn't present, but I began to look at my own situation and Someone asked me, hey, did you go to the protests? I said, I went to none of them. He said, why? I said, because I've been to all the protests. And I began to respect this man as an 87-year-old man who's given his life 50 plus years to this idea of black man, the black woman, the black family. There's an interview one time of Thurgood Marshall, our only black, well, our first black Supreme Court judge. And someone asked him why he was retiring. And instead of giving this long soliloquy, because he'd been around forever, he looked at the report and he said, I'm old. I want to enjoy whatever I have left of my life. And when I watched the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I felt that. I felt that we owed him, in the black community particularly, we owed him a bit of an apology. That we would call him into action over and over and over, but we call him into action and the things haven't changed. We haven't made that switch. Let me give a shout out. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Nadir. Hang on with me. Let me roll here. For those of us who've seen the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan over a span of years, so I'm 53, so I remember seeing him for a very long time. He's been a part of my development for a very long time. Particularly African-American Muslims here in the United States, the transition from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to W.D. Muhammad to Mr. Louis Farrakhan, it's a very interesting thing because those transitions happen, even with difficulties. Those transitions happen with no violence, no shedding of blood. We just had ideological issues. His ideological issue did focus more on the needs of African Americans as opposed to being a part of the international Muslim circle, if you will, international Muslim conversation. And yesterday, well, not yesterday, but Saturday, as I watched him, it was really, really interesting because I thought about somebody watching him for the first time and realized that they're not really watching him. They're not watching the Farrakhan that did the Million Man March. Some of the marches, like in Washington, D.C., where they cleaned up the drug dealing, and not just him, but I mean the whole apparatus of the Nation of Islam, cleaning up the neighborhoods, getting young men to take responsibility, young black men to take responsibility for their lives, uphold the idea of community, if you will. They weren't seeing that. And I began to worry. I'm like, what are they seeing? Like, what are these young brothers and sisters seeing? Because, and I'm not bashing. Right now in the driver's seat in terms of social justice, Black Lives Matter is in the driver's seat. But understand, them being in the driver's seat at this point in time meant that he was ruled, in some regards, obsolete. It was the older African Americans like myself that were going, where's Farrakhan? We're looking for him like he's supposed to go in a phone booth. I'm dating myself. When's the last time you saw a phone booth? But if there was one, he'd run and put on his cape with a big, star, moon, crescent on the back, and he would fly into action. And what I understood was something he gave in a speech many years ago about the importance of listening to your teachers, listening to people who have gone through things before. You see, most of the people in Black Lives Matter, groups like that, people that came out to protest, they were young people. When I say young people, I'm not saying that they weren't committed, they weren't inspired, they didn't have integrity, sincerity, but they were young, which means that they never saw when that movement was there with absolutely no protection of the law. It is the will of the people to lift themselves up, the will of the people to guard their own families, the will of the people, if need be, to protect themselves, as Malcolm said, by any means necessary. And we don't have that. There's a rush right now. There's a realignment right now to see who's going to lead people. And what I want people to understand why Minister Farrakhan is important, whether you like him or not. You're looking at one of the last leaders of men. One of the last leaders of men. Meaning you walk into a room and people fall in line and follow you. And the only reason they follow you is because you don't fear anything but God, and that imbues them, and they don't fear anything but God. And the interesting part is, we're not talking about a religious center right now. We're not talking about a space that we can all get into. We're not talking about prayer. He talked about that. There's no praying school. There's no anchor in many, many regards in the present community for black men to be black men. Because only black men and black women can educate other people about what black existence means. The strategy has been all along, brothers and sisters, that America could wait out the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that they could wait out the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And it's interesting because we're not seeing it. I joked about this concept of the old grumpy black man. He was that, and then some. And I realized why old grumpy black men get upset and angry. It's because young folks don't listen. They don't tell you, they tell you don't do X, Y, and Z only for the fact that they've already done it and paid the price and made the sacrifices. And I listened to the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan, and people, you can say whatever you want to. He said it, that when he's gone, there won't be another one. Just like when Muhammad Ali passed away. He was a leader of men. When he was gone, there was nothing to replace him. Malcolm, same way. Martin, same way. I'm saying that the black community and the idea of liberation and struggle have produced a set of men and women, because we will follow black women if they're strong, black women follow black men if they're strong. But we produced this set of people that knew how to lead. And right now, I don't know who's leading. Even the President of the United States is not leading. Anybody that threatens to be a leader, he tries to take them out or discredit them. It's just like racism. You know, racism is a very simple formula. Whatever it is that's good about you, they discredit. Whatever it is that's bad about you, they highlight. Whatever it is they don't know about you, they make up. He spoke about that in his speech. The idea that God, if you will, God has finally said, let me give you something to remind you that I'm God and you're not. And here we are. A pandemic that started basically in late February or mid-February, maybe late January, who knows. But we still haven't been able to wrap our minds around the fact that, yes, this is something that you can't, You can't extrapolate. You can't rationalize. And he said it in a very eloquent way, a very loving and beautiful way. And I'm not sure that we really even wanted that loving way from Minister Farrakhan. We didn't want it. Most of us thought we were going to get the fire and brimstone, but my mentor, Mr. Dick Gregory, and let me tie this together a little bit for you. When Dick Gregory passed away, brothers and sisters, he was 84 years old. 84 years old. When he died, the person who did his eulogy was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who at the time I believe was 83. And Bill Cosby was in there, who was pushing 82, 80 something. But in that room, it was silent. In that room, we listened because you had a demonstrated practice of understanding that the person in front of you, you will be willing to follow them. They will be your leader. And I don't mean blindly, like I don't see anything. Yes, you're going to question, you're going to do, but in the root of it, you would look and say, this is a leader of men. This is a leader of women. This is a builder of families. And in that, you built a trust. That was the secret sauce. Because Minister Louis Farrakhan's influence is not just with the Nation of Islam. He has just as much pull and gravitas with non-black Muslims who don't, let's say, who don't per se, they don't join the nation, but they understand the importance. And in this speech, there were two things I really, really wanted to drill down on. Number one, he explained to us that our investment in this world, in this society, was a failure to begin with. We've been sold pipe dreams, and when they stopped selling us pipe dreams, we sold ourselves pipe dreams. We still want to believe that this society is going to accept us. We know better. We're intelligent people. He talked about not taking the vaccine that they're going to offer us in a couple of years, and he said why. He said because we don't know what's in the vaccine. And we have just as many health experts and specialists and epidemiologists and infectious disease experts who can tell us, but do we have the will to congeal that type of information and find out for ourselves? He shouted from the mountaintops or that garden, almost black man, you got to do for self. Black liberation movements, you got to do for self. I'm not saying what's going on now is being hijacked, but it don't look like I don't feel comfortable if I don't know you like that. You just show up to a rally. I don't know. You could be a spy. I don't know. But we've been so compromised in believing, brothers and sisters, this whole idea, all lives matter. Well, okay, but did it matter back in the 50s? Did it matter back in the 60s? Did it matter back in the 40s? You see, Mr. Louis Farrakhan reminded me of something. He reminded me something from a speech he said several years ago. And basically he was saying we're not a hashtag people. We're not a hashtag people. We're not people that connect through social media. We connect through spiritual connections. Meaning I know your father. I know one of the best parts about being Muslim, particularly African American Muslim, is you can connect the dots on the leadership in that masjid. And 9 times out of 10, if it's a black masjid, it's either going to wind up with the nation or even a smaller spot, maybe with Ahmadiyya. But it's going to come, if you will, and be wrapped around the fact that black identity and black family were the things that they were pushing for. Because everyone knows the salvation or the savior of the black existence, of course, is the family. And he looked around the audience, and without saying it, he literally said, where are the men? Where are the men? Where are the men? Then he said, where are the sisters? Where are the builders of civilization? And I took that to heart. Because even my position, as being a comedian, I'm a commentator, I'm a social advocate, I'm a lot of things, man. But, I realized maybe I am in training to be an old, grumpy black man because I want results. And at 87 years old, we want results from him, but we need to show who the results are. Mr. Dick Gregory said something to me, and I'll never forget. He asked me how long I wanted to do stand-up. And I didn't answer quick enough. And he goes, well, I've been doing stand-up at this point. He says, I'm 80 years old. How long you want to do stand-up to? And I was like, I don't want to do it to 80 years old. And I asked him why 80 years old. And he looked at me, he said, Preacher Moss, when I started this journey in stand-up, he said, look at the group, the collective of folks I had around me. Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, Ossie Davis. He said, I had this collective of dynamic people around me. And he said, I was blessed. He said, but now I've outlived the collective. He said, when I look around and things break down and I look at society, he said, I don't have allies. I don't have people that come up in the struggle. And maybe that's why the struggle is a little bit watered down. Maybe I might have gone overboard talking about the connection between Black Lives Matter and white supremacy, and that connection was pretty basic, that they were both leaderless organizations. But I will say this, current leadership will not and has no plans for Black men and Black families, more so Black families. It is a compromise, if you will, on the word Black. And instead of using the word Black Lives Matter, what about freedom matters? What about justice matters? What about equality matters? And I know people are going to go, well, I understand. People are going to make this thing an issue. I'm like, no, why aren't we not saying it in our own communities? You see, because that was the difference between the March on Washington, the first March on Washington, the Million Man March, is it was Black people talking to Black people about community issues. And now we don't really have that community. We don't have that traditional community. If anybody can remember the Million Man March, just the amount of human capital converging on the nation's capital, human capital converging on Washington, D.C., and the attitude and the spirit. And even then, people didn't want the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to speak at his own rally. Black leaders were scared to death because, people were going to pull out funding if it was his idea. And he stood there and he didn't chastise anybody. He asked the same questions then that he asked yesterday, but he asked this weekend. He said, where's the accountability? We got all this money. I always hear we have all the collective income of all the Black people. We ain't building no. You know why we have historically Black colleges and universities? Because we ain't built a school in God knows how many years. That's why. Where the Black banks at? I know one in D.C. I know a couple Black credit unions. Where's the Black hospital? Now, I don't mean clinics. I mean Black hospital. Where are hospitals that are so great that people coming out of medical school, they want to be interns at that school. They want to be at that school, at that hospital, and learn from that particular situation. Where is, and I'm going to say this, where's the drive for greatness? I didn't say perfection. I say greatness. Because perfection, you never reach perfection. You perfect. Greatness, you can be great, but you can expand on it. And I look at greatness in this way, that you can share it with other people. It can be something that is infectious. It can be something that people lean to and grab hold of. A few items, and then I'm going to close out. If I told you that I have immense respect and I love the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I wouldn't be lying. When I became Muslim, through a series of events, I was all lined up to join the Nation of Islam. Let's just call it what it was. So that's what I wanted to do. Allah had another plan, and I wound up with the War-Themed Muhammad community, who, in many regards, they had so many brothers from the nation. It was like Nation Light. But in a way, in a very, very traditional way, people like him, Farrakhan, people like Imam Muhammad, people like Malcolm X, left some strong legacies that it empowered us not to be great men, but to be great leaders, to step beyond the scope of race and enter ourselves in the fight for justice. And that's where we are now. That's where we are now. But it's compromised now. I'm not saying COVID. Maybe we got comfortable. You know, there's a scene in the movie, I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. And a revolutionary guy runs in and he goes, where all the revolutionaries at? And the guy goes, oh man, they all got government jobs. And so maybe some of us metaphorically have gotten comfortable. Maybe we have government jobs. Maybe we've trusted this whole idea of leaderless organizations to, in some regards, and then this is the crazy part. Leaderless organizations, we don't know who they are, exactly what they stand for, but somehow we believe that they're going to have our best interests at heart. He reminded me on Saturday that that's foolish, that it's silly, and that it's immature. He reminded me that all my teachers never raised me that way. And that includes my mother and my father, my grandfather, my grandmother. They never raised me that way. And maybe we need to get to a spot where you see that revolution or you see that protest over there, we don't go to that protest. We're going to say, what? Do for self. And maybe our protest is like, hey, man, we're going to build our infrastructure in our inner city. We'll find the money. We're going to build our own colleges and institutions. We'll find the money. We're going to build our own hospitals. We don't need your vaccines. We'll come up with our own vaccines. Because the model of do for self is a religious indictment when you don't do it. When I say religious indictment, it means that you're not living your best life according to whatever, Quran, Bible, even the Torah. You're not living your best life. Because you can look around you and you can see that others are not living their best life. It's like the idea of a church or a mosque in the middle of the city, and around that masjid or that church, it's immaculate. But in the communities around it, it's dirty. It's polluted. The people are sick. There's trash on the street. There's ills on the street. And we sit there going, as long as this part is safe, that's all I'm worried about. I'm going to take a hint, and I'm going to take a little bit of a spanking from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Because it was my dad who reminded me of what he did back 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it was my mom who reminded me what they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And what my mom said, I wasn't Muslim. Check this out. She goes, I wasn't Muslim, but it made me want to straighten up. It made our protest just a little bit stronger. It made our protest just a little bit more pronounced and prolonged. I'm not saying, hey, I'm like Malcolm. I'm not saying you can't join us. I'm not saying you can't support us, but you just can't join us. When's the last time you had a protest of just all black people about black issues? I'm not saying that other people can't join, but let us handle our thing in-house first. And I'll close out on this. He said, and I quote, you may not see him for a long, long, long time. Now you could throw in blah, blah, blah. I'm going to throw in, you know what? I'm not going to say it's health related. I'm not going to say it's health related. It may be. But even a lion like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan deserves a rest. He deserves a rest. And if anybody knows, I've talked about from the fruit of Islam, the general orders. General order Number 5 is do not leave your post until properly relieved. Brother and sister, he's 87 years old and he's still on post. He's 87 years old, he's still on post. Imagine your grandmother, grandfather still trying to work a job at 87 years old. Imagine them marching, giving speeches, 2-3 hour speeches, talks, lessons at 87 years old. You would feel a sense of guilt. Like that person doesn't need to be doing that. And that's what I took away from his speech. He doesn't need to be doing that. We've heard enough of his talks. The time for action is now. It's been now. And we need to just straighten up our backs and say, hey, listen, there's a new sheriff in town in terms of Black intentionality, Black life, and Black narrative, and just go from there. We can't wait any longer. And neither can he. It's Preacher Mars, the ShOUT Show. See you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.